What's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko Podcast. I'm DK Wrestler.
And I'm MD Shady.
And in today's podcast, it is an all Star Wars podcast, but more specifically, we're talking all about the prequels. Now, if you've been a fan of the channel for quite a while, you know that we've done previous Star Wars podcasts. I believe the first year that we had the podcast, or maybe the second one, we did Empire Strikes Back. Then we did a New Hope podcast. And then last year, we actually did Return of the Jedi for its 40th anniversary. So we thought instead of just doing separate movies, we thought we'd finally just do the trilogies. And I think we actually announced last year during our Return of the Jedi pod that we were going to do a prequels pod anyways. So now we will talk about those three movies in the prequels all in one podcast instead of having to wait the next few years for us to talk about those movies separately. And maybe, who knows, if you guys want to, we can do a sequels podcast realistically to finally finish off the whole trilogy of the 9 movies for Star Wars. But nonetheless, today, yes, we are talking about episode 1, 2, and 3. We'll talk about obviously each movie and different Funko Pops that are involved and our opinions of those movies. But nonetheless, I guess I will kick off right now by talking about the very first movie of this trilogy. It is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, released May 16th, 1999 on a budget of $115 million, but the box office at $1.027 billion, in which a little plot that we have here provided by a user over on IMDb. Jedi Knights Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi find themselves embroiled in a galactic trade dispute that hides a more sinister agenda. During their mission, they encounter a young slave named Anakin Skywalker on the desert planet of Tatooine. Anakin shows an extraordinary affinity for the Force, the mystical energy that empowers Jedis, leading Qui-Gon to believe that he may be the chosen one, a figure to be destined to bring balance to the Force. As they try to navigate the political turmoil and dangers of the galaxy, they end up on the planet Naboo. There they meet Queen Amidala, who seeks help to free her people from the oppressive Trade Federation. As they work together, young Anakin joins them on their quest, showcasing his extraordinary piloting skills and unbridled enthusiasm. But a dark shadow looms: the Sith, ancient enemies of the Jedi, have returned. Darth Sidious, a Sith Lord, manipulates the events from the shadows, using his apprentice Darth Maul to sow chaos and discord. Phantom Menace, I can say for the longest time, people have hated it, but then there's also people that love it. There is a huge love-hate relationship with this movie. I do think, if I can sum it up with one word, it is underrated, because I do feel that this isn't like the worst Star Wars movie, but of course it isn't one of the best Star Wars movies when you're ranking them between original trilogy, prequels, and even the sequels. There was a lot of cool moments involved, of course. The lightsaber duel, which I guess I will mention right now, one of my favorite lightsaber duels of all time, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan against Darth Maul. There's also the pod racing moments. I do enjoy watching this movie from time to time.
Phantom Menace is definitely pretty high up in my ranking of the Star Wars movies. I just think that this movie is so different, especially when you have the original trilogy movies and then so many years go by and then fans finally get more Star Wars. I find it funny, like, especially if you guys have seen the movie Fanboys, where basically these fans of Star Wars, they're wanting to watch the movie before it comes out. I think it's like a week before it comes out. They're trying to go to the Lucas Ranch and basically watch it and break in and watch this movie. Then with all the trials and tribulations at the end, when they finally sit down front row in the movie theater to watch the movie, they say, I believe the movie ends with, they're like, well, what if it's bad? And then the movie ends, because a lot of people do consider this not a great movie, but it's because it's so different than the original trilogy. I mean, going from the 70s and the early 80s to obviously 1999, with so many years passing, you got CGI in there, and that's when you get Jar Jar Binks. I think Jar Jar Binks is a fine character, in my opinion. Some people hate him because of, I don't know if it's the CGI, if it's because he's stupid, all these things, but you think the Star Wars universe has been laid out across so many planets, there's going to be characters that are similar to Jar Jar Binks, so I think that's absolutely fine that way. And I don't know, there's just a lot to love about episode 1. I feel like it just has a lot of nostalgia for me as well, but then you also get to see Anakin Skywalker at this young juvenile form and see exactly how he gets brought up into becoming a Jedi, and then of course knowing that he does become Darth Vader when you get to watch the prequels, because assuming that you watched episode 4, 5, and 6 before you watched the prequels, it's just such an interesting story. And Qui-Gon Jinn is an awesome Jedi. Darth Maul is wicked as well. Of course, they brought him back in the Clone Wars because people loved him so damn much. He was such a cool bad guy. And then there's like the pod racing. I think that that was a pretty cool thing that you get to learn that happens on Tatooine, kind of ran by Jabba the Hutt, and just such a cool type of thing. There's a lot of really cool characters that are so different than what we had seen at this point in Star Wars that I think at the time I can understand why people would have hated this movie. But when you look back at it now, when you look at all the prequel movies, all of the original trilogy, and all the sequels, this totally makes sense and kind of lines up in the Star Wars universe.
All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the Funko Pops that are in the Star Wars lineup that are related to the Phantom Menace, which, of course, the main pops that I want to talk about are the newly released Phantom Menace 25th Anniversary Pops. Yes, this year is 25 years since the Phantom Menace had released. Funko's doing a huge wave of pops involved in the set, and we'll talk about some other pops also that are here. But the list of pops that we are talking about today, I'll read them off before actually talking about the pops individually. So we have, for the 25th anniversary set, we have a new standalone Obi-Wan Kenobi, a young Anakin Skywalker, a Padme Amidala, a battle droid, a Darth Maul Pop Rides, Queen Amidala on the Throne Pop Deluxe, and then we have a new Jar Jar Binks. And then there's also, if you guys know, there's like the retro Star Wars pops where it's kind of like the comic book sketching. They also did 4 of those pops, I believe, based off of this set that's a Target exclusive, but we won't be talking about those today. But a lot of those pops are pretty decent though. But then pops that weren't involved in that set, but of course we want to mention them now so that we can talk about each of the characters at the same time. We got Qui-Gon Jinn, which I think the one that I had sent over to MD is the newly released Amazon exclusive one. And then we have the unfinished C3PO that's exclusive to Star Wars Celebration, or not Star Wars Celebration, the Smuggler's Bounty exclusive box. Sebulba, which is a part of the Smuggler's Bounty exclusive box. And then the standalone Darth Maul that was a Star Wars Celebration 2019 exclusive, I believe. So with this new set, so this is actually the first time we're actually talking about the set on the podcast, since we no longer do these podcasts weekly and don't talk about the weekly announcements. This set is pretty decent. I am glad that we do have a standalone, like, more Padawan Obi-Wan pop here with like the braid on the side, especially because we did kind of get it when we had the deluxe set for the Duel of Fates, which also is a really nice set of pops for that awesome lightsaber duel. The young Anakin is all right. It just seems like it's a more 2024 standard pop compared to the original one that's pretty much exactly like this. The Padme is pretty decent because it's like young version of Padme, so I think that makes sense. Watto, I honestly don't know what the difference is between this Watto and the Star Wars Celebration. It must be like a little bit of a posing change because it looks fairly identical to the one that released for Star Wars Celebration the same time as the Darth Maul that we are talking about. The battle droid is probably the highlight of the set because I think for years I've been mentioning, even on like when we do a San Diego or New York Comic Con Pops predictions video, that I want to see a battle droid, and then it doesn't happen. But then now we have this Phantom Menace set, and now we finally have it, which is really awesome. Translated pretty well into pop form, especially how they executed the pop eyes to make it look like the battle droid eyes. And I've noticed a lot of people actually buying multiples of the battle droid just to do their own battle droid army, which I think is just absolutely really awesome. And then we have the Queen Amidala on the throne, which is pretty cool. The Darth Maul pop rides, which I'm surprised that this hasn't been done previous, but I know that my only gripe about this is that, from what I can understand, is that this is a fairly small pop with a huge box, which seems to be a huge problem with Funko nowadays, is making these smaller pops with massive box sizes. I don't know why. Like, this pop, I think, could have definitely been put into at least a 6-inch pop and then call it a rise instead of that massive pop. Like, we seen it earlier also with the Elmo, which is more of a 4-inch pop, and then they put this massive pop rides box. So I think that was unnecessary. And then we have Jar Jar, and people always like to say, oh, it's Jar Jar with blue balls. The Qui-Gon is pretty cool. We've gotten multiple versions, like the OG one from New York Comic Con 2016. We had the holographic one that released, I think, Star Wars Celebration the year after. And then you have this newer version, which is pretty decent. I love the detail involved. The unfinished C3PO is not only one of my favorite pops for like this movie, but I think it's one of my favorite pops they've done just overall for Star Wars. I think they executed it very well with the different colored wires. Then we have Sebulba. This is pretty cool. I think my only gripe is I wish they would have had the pod racing rides with this. I think that would have been awesome with Sebulba, but still having him here is still pretty cool. And then we have the Darth Maul, which actually isn't the one from Star Wars Celebration. I forgot that wasn't the one I sent. It was the GameStop exclusive Red Saber series Darth Maul, which is still cool because it's like a standalone Darth Maul with his lightsaber ignited on both sides. But with the Star Wars Celebration one, I believe it's only the one that's ignited and it's hooded. So this pop is still pretty decent. You got the Mustafar base, which, I mean, there was no Mustafar in the first movie, but I still thought this is a perfect pop to kind of talk about as a standalone Darth Maul pop for this instant, besides talking about like the OG Darth Maul pop. And then the other newer ones were basically from like Rebels and the Clone Wars. But I can't wait to see what Funko has cooking up for the rest of the year, because I'm sure that, let's say, San Diego Comic Con or even New York Comic Con, we will get a couple of more Phantom Menace Funko Pops.
Yeah, I definitely think that this new wave of Phantom Menace pops is pretty solid for the most part. Obi-Wan is pretty cool. I do like that you get this younger version of him. And if you didn't want to get that whole, like, I guess, 3 pops to make the scene and you just want a standalone pop, this is a good one to get because it looks fairly good. The Anakin, and this one's okay. I like that you get the version with the goggles and the helmet on. I think that that's all right. But we've also seen some young Anakin pops before, so it's nothing too crazy. And then Padme is okay as well. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it's still a pretty cool pop of her. And I don't remember if there's actually been a pop of just regular Padme like this before. So if there hasn't been, then this one is definitely a good one to be the first. And then with Watto, yeah, this is so similar to the original Watto, which I do have in my personal collection. So I don't know, maybe I'll have to compare them and actually look at them in person. But this one looks so similar to that first one. And maybe it's the lack of wings. I can't really tell if he has wings with this photo of the pop, but it is very, very similar. The head sculpt seems almost exactly the same. And then we have the battle droid, and this is pretty dang cool. I think that it translated very, very well into Funko Pop form with the way that they did the eyes and just the way that the head is a little bit bigger than it needs to be, which is, of course, an iconic look for Funko Pop. So that makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm not surprised that people are super hyped about that pop. And then we have the pop rides of Darth Maul, and this is pretty cool. I like this. This is probably one of my favorite Darth Maul pops at this point. I love that like sand speeder thing that he rides. I think that that's really cool. And then we have Queen Amidala on the throne there, and this is pretty awesome as well. If you don't have the singular pop of Queen Amidala, I think that this is definitely a great option to go with, but it would be probably in a deluxe box, which it depends if you like that in your collection or not. And then we have the Jar Jar Binks, and this is okay. I don't think this is necessary. It is a pretty cool pop, but we've seen a few different Jar Jars at this point, and they're kind of all the same, but of course they go by what movie, or let's say with the Clone Wars that it's in. So this is okay. I don't think it's absolutely necessary for a collection though. And then the Qui-Gon Jinn pop, this is awesome. I love the look of this Qui-Gon pop. I love the way that his body pose is. I think that's perfect for this pop. And then we have the C3PO, and I have this pop in my collection. This is awesome. I love this look of C3PO where the wires are exposed like this. I always have, especially with the Phantom Menace figures that came out around the time that the movie was out. I love that figure so much, and I have that figure in my collection. And I don't know, there's just something about this look with C3PO that I love. So I knew I needed to have this pop, and that's why it's in my collection. And then we have Sebulba, and this is pretty cool as well. But I do have to agree with DK that this would have been more significant if it did have the pod that he races with. I think that would have been pretty cool, but it's a really solid pop to begin with though. Like, it looks like a Funko Pop, but it also has a lot of differences that normal Funko Pops don't have, and a lot of really cool detail in there as well. And then to finish it off with the last pop, we do have that Red Saber series Darth Maul, and this one's pretty cool. I like this. I don't think it necessarily makes 100% sense.
The next movie we have here is, of course, Episode 2. It's Attack of the Clones, released May 16th, 2002, on a budget of $115 million, and the box office was $653.8 million. So obviously it didn't make as much as The Phantom Menace did, but the plot as provided by a user over on IMDb: a decade after the Naboo invasion, Senator Padme Amidala is returning to Coruscant, where she instantly discovers that someone has put a price on her head. At the same time, the Galactic Republic is under pressure due to a separatist movement, which is forcing Chancellor Palpatine to create a clone army to keep them safe from the growing threat. The Jedi Council dispatch Obi-Wan Kenobi to launch an investigation into who's behind Senator Amidala's assassination, while his apprentice, a now grown Anakin Skywalker, is assigned to keep watch over Amidala, while falling into a secret romance with her which goes against his vows as a Jedi. Meanwhile, renegade Jedi Count Dooku is preparing to go to war against the Jedi with a united droid army that could bring the Republic to its knees. So I mentioned earlier about how I feel that The Phantom Menace is a very underrated movie. I feel that Attack of the Clones is a very overrated movie. I know a lot of people do love this movie, and I just don't see what the hype is, because I feel like a lot of this movie is really terrible of how some of the like character development is with, like, let's say like Anakin Skywalker. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some cool moments. There's some cool characters, like, of course, Jango Fett, and then you get to see a young Boba Fett if you're a huge fan of the original trilogy. It's like, oh, there's Boba. And then there's even one character, I can't remember his name, but like the scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi, he goes into like the cafe and he meets up with like that big guy to talk about like the little bullet. I thought that character was pretty cool, but I remember watching this like a few years back for the first time in a while trying to like rethink my process of what I think is like the best to worst movies in the Star Wars trilogy. And I truly can say that Attack of the Clones is the worst Star Wars film out of the 9 films. And like, there's just a lot of things that like just turned me off completely about this movie. But at least we had like the Clone Wars that came after this for the series, because that was definitely better than this whole movie put together.
Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. Yeah, this one's interesting because of course I watched this a ton as a kid, but yeah, it's not really a great movie, and there's so many different scenes which I could see why people would like it, because there's so much different stuff that you get from here. You get Star Wars in the sky, you get Star Wars in the city, you get Star Wars in the sand, you get Star Wars in like another planet where you get to like see where the clones are from and all that. So I can understand why people like it, but I don't know. It's not the greatest. One thing that I do like about this movie is that, of course, they change actors from Anakin so that you can see the development, and now he is obviously older, and that's where Hayden Christensen comes in. But yeah, I don't know. Not one of the greatest movies, but there are some pluses to it, like seeing Jango Fett. You get to see a young Boba Fett, which I'm sure a lot of fans from, if they were a kid in the 70s and 80s, to see a young Boba Fett was probably pretty cool to see. And there's some pretty decent battles. I forget what the one battle is. The Battle of Geonosis, is that what it's called?
Geonosis?
Geonosis, yes. That's pretty cool. Like, it's interesting, but it is a lot of CGI, of course, which we didn't get with the original Star Wars. It was a lot of actual puppets and different things like that happening with the original. So I could see why people hated this when it came out. With the box office of like 600 million, I think that makes a lot of sense. Of course, the first movie is going to get a ton of money because it's a lot of Star Wars fans that are like, wow, there's a new Star Wars movie for the first time in well over a decade. Now that they watched the first one and a lot of people not liking it, they're probably not going to go see that second movie. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
And now for the Funko Pops for this movie, this was actually fairly difficult to find because, of course, there hasn't really been many Attack of the Clones pops. So there were a lot of those like cool, obscure Jedis that they made that we can definitely talk about in this case. So first Funko Pop I'm going to mention is the Anakin Skywalker that was a New York Comic Con 2022 exclusive that was indeed for Attack of the Clones. Then we have the hooded Obi-Wan Kenobi that's exclusive to Walgreens, the Count Dooku that was exclusive to the Star Wars Smugglers bounty box, Jango Fett, which was exclusive to Walgreens. Of course, there is the OG one also that was released back in the day. The Padme Amidala that was exclusive to Emerald City Comic Con in 2018. Mace Windu that was exclusive to Walgreens, the OG Clone Trooper, which of course it's Attack of the Clones, and that these were the Clone Troopers had debuted, and then some of those obscure Jedis like Plo Koon, which is exclusive to Walgreens, along with Kit Fisto, and then Ayla Secura, which was exclusive to the Star Wars Smugglers Bounty box. The first pop we're talking about obviously is the Anakin Skywalker, which this was wicked. I remember for the longest time a lot of Comic-Con exclusives not really being the greatest for Star Wars, and then when when you have a movie that doesn't have that many pops like Attack of the Clones, and then having this pop being released, this was really awesome. I think a lot of people did really want Padawan Anakin as a pop for a long time, especially with that braid. And I think they did an excellent job with that, especially with the two different lightsabers, since, of course, he was battling Count Dooku by himself at one point, and so he had Obi-Wan's lightsaber with him, and it leads to Anakin getting his hand chopped off by Count Dooku. Yeah, this pop was really awesome, and this was released right around the time it was the 20th anniversary of Attack of the Clones in 2022. Then we have the hooded Obi-Wan, which some people can say this is Revenge of the Sith. I think this is Attack of the Clones because I think of the scene where he is on Camino and it's raining out, so I think that makes sense for this to be Attack of the Clones because his hood would have been up, and then he's ready to like take out Jango Fett. But that pop's pretty cool. The OG Count Dooku, which had eluded me for the longest time, and I still don't have it, but I was content when they came out with the Red Saber series pop, and it's under the name Darth Tyrannus, which is Count Dooku's like Sith Lord name, but you still know him as Count Dooku. Still pretty cool pop though for this OG one. And then we have the Jango Fett pop, which is really awesome with that nice fire base. I think they did an excellent job with that. Padme Amidala from Emerald City Comic Con. This was the scene I believe they were in Geonosis, and then like her and Anakin are about to get tied up, and you have those like rhinoceros type creatures that are trying to attack the pole, and they try to survive. That's where that's based off of. And then Mace Windu, pretty cool for him to have a pop. And then we have the Clone Trooper. So weird to see this Clone Trooper compare to the ones they've made recently for like, let's say the Ahsoka series or just Clone Wars in general, but still pretty cool at the time. And then these obscure Jedis like Plo Koon, which I feel like is a person that never gets talked about all that much and is a really cool pop overall. I think they executed Plo Koon as best as they possibly can for a Funko Pop, and like it almost looks exactly like the character itself, and not having to like do like the traditional Funko Pop eyes involved with that. And then Kit Fisto, pretty cool pop. And then we have the Aliyah Sakura, which is also a pretty decent pop. I do like when they had done those like obscure Jedis and then make them, let's say, like a Walgreens exclusive or some sort of exclusive where it's a little bit harder to get, because I feel like if you made them as a common, they wouldn't sell as well as, let's say, like an Obi-Wan Kenobi or an Anakin Skywalker. So it was really cool seeing those kinds of pops at this time.
All right, so starting off with the Anakin, yeah, this pop is fire. This is a wicked pop. When it got announced, I think a lot of people are super hyped for this because, of course, we weren't seeing pops from Attack of the Clones that often, and I think a lot of people did want to see this version of Anakin, and I think they executed this very well. I mean, you got the braid, and both the green and the blue saber with this pop is just amazing. This is a great pop. This like is the definition of what a con pop should be, and for New York Comic Con, I think this makes a lot of sense. And then we have the Walgreens Obi-Wan Kenobi. And yeah, this one's pretty cool as well. And I do have to agree with DK that this is definitely episode 2 with the hood up like that. I don't necessarily think it needs to have the lightsaber, but it does make sense to have that lightsaber. It's a little bit more added detail, a little bit more to the pose, and is pretty cool overall. Then we have the Count Dooku, and this pop is amazing. This is a great pop. It looks just like Count Dooku. The pose is good. The lightsaber is awesome. They made it very well known that that lightsaber is a curved hilt on it, which is perfect. And I really love how the cape isn't just down, it's actually kind of flowing in the wind, which is just perfect. This is a great pop. And then before I get on to the next pop, I do want to talk about the bases on the Star Wars pops, where you do have that base, which screams Star Wars to me with like those 3 tiers. It's kind of like that rate that you see a lot of lightsaber duels happen on. So I do like that. But then you have that Star Wars logo in the middle, and I think that that's okay for these pops. But then getting into the Jango Fett pop, this pop is almost a perfect pop. I mean, the pose is so cool. It's awesome. It's a little bit of metallic. There's the see-through fire coming out of his jetpack. It's so great. And then you slap that Star Wars logo in the middle there, and it just throws this pop right off. And Funko needs to they really need to stop doing this, especially with pops like this. The normal based pops, I'm fine with. But when you have a pop where the base is something like a jet stream like this, I just don't think there's a need to have that Star Wars logo on there. It just ruins almost the whole pop for me when this is a really gorgeous pop that I really, really like. And just that totally throws it off. And then we have Padme, and this is a pretty cool pop. I like this one. Of course, this is her on the Battle of Geonosis in the movie, and I think they did a pretty cool job of this. I would have liked to see maybe more of the like chains that they're kind of like locked up to with this pop. I think that that could have maybe boosted this pop up a little bit more than what it is, because the pose isn't crazy, but the details there and it looks pretty good. Then we have Mace Windu, and this pop is pretty badass. I don't think anyone can deny that. This is just a solid pop. There's not a ton of detail, but there doesn't need to be. The purple lightsaber is awesome, of course. And yeah, this is just a cool pop. And then we have the original Clone Trooper. And yeah, looking at some newer pops compared to one of these OG ones, you can definitely see the differences. But this isn't even that bad. The details there, especially for a pop that is this old at this point. And then we have Plo Koon, which is probably my favorite Jedi of all time. I loved Plo Koon as a kid. I thought his design was awesome. Some of the stuff in some of the books with the extended universe was really cool as well. So yeah, I like Plo Koon, and this pop is really cool. The body is a little lackluster, is kind of an older pop at this point, being 97 in the Star Wars lineup, that you kind of do have that problem with the arms to the side. Maybe we could see another Plo Koon sometime down the line, and maybe a little bit more detail to that, like alien-esque head and like apparatus that he has on his eyes as well as his mouth. And then a pose that is a lot better for now with the sculpting that they have, not just that arm to the side pose, and a lightsaber that's a little bit longer because of course they were kind of short when it comes to the original pops. And then we have Kit Fisto, and he's a pretty cool Jedi as well. I think that this is a solid pop. I believe that there might have been another pop. I could be completely wrong about that, but this one is pretty cool as well. It gets the job done. And then we have Alia Sakura, and this is pretty solid as well. It does kind of have that arms to the side thing, but I don't think there's too much that they need to do with this pop. This looks cool. She's an awesome Twi'lek, I believe, is the species. Being a Jedi of that species is pretty damn cool as well. So I think they did a pretty good job on this pop as well.
And last but not least, for this prequel trilogy, it is episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, released May 19th. Don't say that date in front of Kane, 2005, on a budget of 113 million, so 2 million less than the other one movies, but the box office was $868.4 million, much more than what they had made with Attack of the Clones. And the plot provided from a user over on IMDb: nearly 3 years have passed since the beginning of the Clone Wars. The Republic, with the help of the Jedi, takes on Count Dooku and the Separatists. With a new threat rising, the Jedi Council sends Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker to aid the captured Chancellor. Anakin feels he is ready to be promoted to Jedi Master. Obi-Wan is hunting down the Separatist General Grievous. When Anakin has future visions of pain and suffering coming Padme's way, he sees Master Yoda for counsel. When Darth Sidious executes Order 66, it destroys most of all the Jedi have built. Experience the birth of Darth Vader, feel the betrayal that leads to hatred between two brothers, and witness the power of hope. Easily, Revenge of the Sith is my favorite movie of the prequels. I think that this movie, I feel like obviously not only like needed to happen because of how terrible Attack of the Clones was in my opinion, but I think the whole purpose of the prequels, I find, is that people were wondering, how did Anakin Skywalker become Darth Vader? And I think for the most part they did a decent job on concluding that story right there. There were so many awesome scenes involved with this, especially when like the very beginning scenes, a lot of lightsaber duels also in this movie. Anakin, like, he joins the dark side because he feels that it's one of the ways that he can prevent Padme from dying, but yet Padme does die because of his force choke that he did, and then causes her to pass away. But then she gives birth to obviously Luke and Leia at the same time, being twins. But I don't know, I still am kind of like iffy about like she passed away because she didn't have the will to live. Like
Revenge of the Sith, the first Star Wars movie that I seen in theaters, technically, because I didn't see it in a theater. I went to the drive-in to watch this movie, and I don't think I really cared like too much about Star Wars at that point. I had tons of Star Wars action figures and stuff, but I feel like it was probably because my dad was such a big Star Wars fan that I watched this movie and I had all those figures. But after watching it, I did become a fan of Star Wars, and then kind of fell off of it for a bit and then got back into it huge. So yeah, Revenge of the Sith does have a soft spot in my heart, and this movie's so good. I mean, there's so many awesome scenes in this movie. Of course, a ton of deaths in this movie, whether it's basically the whole Jedi Council, all the younglings, of course, tons of Wookiees, tons of clones, of course, as well. A lot goes on in this movie. It's so good. I really do enjoy this movie, and it's been a while since I've watched it, so I definitely have to go back and watch it again. People complain about Hayden Christensen's like thing in some of these movies, and I don't really see where they come from. Like, this is the character. Like, he's playing that character. He is Anakin Skywalker and you watch him progress to become Darth Vader, I don't really see where I get it. Like he's kind of monotone, but who cares? Some people talk like that. That's kind of how it happens. So I don't really understand why the hatred is there for the acting in this movie when the rest of the movie is just phenomenal. It's always high action for most of it. And there's a lot of really great storytelling. And of course, like DK said, with people finally seeing how Darth Vader becomes about, I think they did a pretty great job of that. And of course, like Padme, yeah, like the will to live, but also like dying at childbirth. Like it kind of makes sense. It's something that happens in nature, I guess you could say, and as well as in like normal parenthood with humans. That does happen. That's something that can happen. So it kind of makes sense to me. And then, of course, when you have in episode 4, A New Hope, where Obi-Wan is talking to Luke about the Clone Wars, and yeah, we see the Revenge of the Sith, and you don't really see anything with the Clone Wars, but then we finally do get to see the Clone Wars with the TV show, and that is just an amazing TV show as well. So it really ties into everything that happened in the prequels, just so good, and Revenge of the Sith is awesome. There was so much promotional items for Revenge of the Sith at the time, too. It was really cool to see Darth Vader's mask on the screen.
Now, for the Funko Pops involving Revenge of the Sith, I had to really dig deep for this because there actually isn't that much Revenge of the Sith Pops, although I can assume that there probably will be a huge wave next year since 2025 will mark 20 years since the movie had released. So I would assume we would get a ton of Revenge of the Sith Pops, just like we are getting Phantom Menace this year. So the Pops that I did choose to talk about here for Revenge of the Sith, first off, we do have the Anakin with the Sith eyes that's exclusive to Walgreens, followed by the Obi-Wan Kenobi that's exclusive to the Star Wars Smuggler's Bounty. And then we have the Duel on Mustafar Pop Movie Moments, which is a Star Wars Smuggler's Bounty exclusive. Then we have the 3-pack that includes Tarful, Palpatine, and then the one random clone trooper that was exclusive to Walmart. The Hot Topic exclusive General Grievous, the Walgreens exclusive Commander Cody, and then we have 3 out of 5 of the Pops involved for the Red Saber series, which we have Darth Sidious, Darth Tyrannus, and Darth Vader, and then ending it off on a pretty horrible note, unfortunately, but it kind of ties in, and that is the Artist Series Darth Vader, which is based off of Mustafar. So with these Pops, starting off with the Red Eyes Anakin Skywalker, or the Sith Eyes Anakin Skywalker, this is a wicked Pop. This is actually a Pop that I had for the longest time in my collection, and then I just ended up selling it because I already have the Duel on Mustafar Pop that I'll get into in a little bit, so I felt like there wasn't really a need for 2 of like essentially the same Pop, but except one is singular and one is in a moment. So I ended up selling this like just as the hype was going on of seeing Hayden Christensen's back in the Star Wars universe playing as Darth Vader in the Obi-Wan series. And I think it was around the time that Hayden Christensen came to Fan Expo Canada in Toronto. And so it was up there at like $150, and I sold it at that price because someone really wanted to get signed by him. So I made some money there, but this is still an awesome Pop if you only wanted the singular Pop. The Obi-Wan Kenobi, this one is all right, but I do feel if you don't want the 2 singular Pops, the Duel on Mustafar Moments is the way to go, in my opinion, because that's pretty much where this Pop is also. And I guess I'll get right into that Duel of Mustafar Pop, which easily, in my opinion, is my favorite Star Wars Pop in the entire Funko lineup. They did such an excellent job with this. They're on the platform as they are flowing through the lava. They have the lava base, of course, like MD mentioned, with like the Star Wars logo being there. That's just, I wish maybe they would have implanted it on the base rather than its own separate thing. Then it would have like flown in a little bit better there. But I think they did an excellent job with like the way that they have their lightsabers, and just, it's just such a good Pop. I think the only gripe is I wish this was glow in the dark for the sake of the fire. Then the 3-pack we have here is the most random Star Wars 3-pack of like all time. The only way you can get a like Sith Lord Darth Sidious in that red attire is with this 3-pack, and it's just so random. Like Palpatine with like the one Wookiee and then the clone trooper. Like I get, of course, like Order 66, so you can have that clone trooper being like close to, I don't think it's exactly Commander Cody, but it's something close to that. And then you have one of the Wookiees. I know like Palpatine also visited like the Wookiee planet, I think, in the movie, but like this is just one of those things that like you could have done Palpatine by itself. Then we have the General Grievous. Prequels Hot Topic exclusive. I know they did the Walgreens exclusive pop earlier on in the Star Wars lineup, and I thought that one was okay, but I always found about the gripe with that one being the fact that he doesn't have the four arms and it was only the two. But with this one, he does have the four arms with the two green lightsabers and the two blue lightsabers. And that's when I ended up deciding for my like specific Sith collection of Star Wars pops. I was like, this is the one I'm getting. I don't need any other General Grievous like the OG one or even like the newer ones they've done for the Clone Wars. I think this was a perfect one to get. And they did such an excellent job on this pop. And then we have the Commander Cody. This is a pretty sweet pop. Lots of cool detail. And especially this is Revenge of the Sith because he does have, I believe that is supposed to be the hologram of Emperor Palpatine or Darth Sidious telling him execute Order 66. So this definitely goes with Revenge of the Sith. And they did a pretty great job with this. And yeah, I can't wait, like I mentioned, for more Revenge of the Sith pops in the near future, maybe next year. And then we have some of the Red Saber series Volume 1 pops like Darth Sidious, which this does make sense in a way because Palpatine does visit Mustafar when Anakin is all burnt to a crisp pretty much. And they did a pretty decent job on this pop. And I do like this series for the most part. I did end up getting this whole set because I thought that was a really cool set, but I didn't buy them at regular price because I felt it's at GameStop. It's probably going to be lower in price at some point, which I got a lot of these at a discounted price. And then we have the Darth Tyrannus once again. I thought I'd throw this in here because, of course, Count Dooku does appear at the beginning of the movie before he gets his head chopped off by Anakin. This pop is all right. I feel like the OG one is a little bit better, but this pop is still pretty cool with that base also. And then Darth Vader, I thought I'd mention, like, because, of course, Mustafar and the fact that, of course, the whole point of the ending is Anakin finally transforming into Darth Vader. And so this pop is all right. It's not one of the best, but it's not one of the worst Darth Vader pops they've done for the Star Wars lineup. And then we got to end it off on a bit of a sour note of talking pops by talking about that meh series of artist series pops. This one is all right. I get it because they were doing Mustafar, so that's why I threw it in there. But this series was just meh. Like, I'll give credit. This probably was one of the better artist series pops, but I feel like when you look at it in the glam shot, like we are, it looks nice. But of course, when you do so many of like the printed paints like this, there's going to be a lot of paint mishaps when you actually get the pop, and it's not going to look as clean as you see on the glam shot here.
All right, so talking about the pops for the Revenge of the Sith, we start off with the Sith-eyed Anakin, and this is a really awesome pop. I think that this looks pretty cool. The pose isn't quite just arms to the side, which is good. It's very similar, but you do have a little bit more. He is a little bit more posed. His hands kind of have that pose that takes away from just being arms down pose. And then we have the Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's the exact opposite. It's pretty much arm down pose. The hand is open, which makes sense. Obi-Wan is much more of a relaxed Jedi. He doesn't need to have a clenched hand or anything like that. But it's also not one of the greatest pops when you get to the duel on Mustafar, where both these pops are now posed perfectly. There's a little bit more detail in their bodies as well as their hair. I think that's great. But then again, you have that Star Wars logo, and it's like, you gotta be kidding me with this. Like, you have the Star Wars logo, and it's like, no shit. We know that it's Star Wars. Like, what other people are dressed up like this with swords that are made out of light dueling each other? We get that it's Star Wars. You don't have to have that Star Wars logo there, which really takes away from the pop, and that's sad. But that being said, this is an amazing pop. I've seen it in person, of course, in DK's collection, as well as seeing it at like shows and in stores. And it's one that I kind of wanted to get, but I never got my hands on, which I'm okay with. But yeah, this thing is great. And then we have that 3-pack, and yeah, this is a little bit obscure of a 3-pack, but I do think it does represent Order 66 very well. Of course, when they're on Kashyyyk is kind of when it happens with Order 66. So I think this makes a lot of sense. You got a Wookiee, you got Sidious, and you got a clone. It kind of just ties in all together. Then we have the hot topic General Grievous, and this is wicked. I remember me and DK saying, like, when are we going to get a 4-arm General Grievous? And then we got it with this one, and it looks wicked. This is a great pop. Lots of detail there. The body looks so cool. And then we have Clone Commander Cody, and this one is amazing as well. The detail on this clone trooper is unreal. And then, of course, having the hologram of Sidious in his hand is perfect as well and absolutely represents this moment in the Star Wars universe. And then going on to some of the Red Saber series pops, we have the Darth Sidious. This is pretty cool. I like this pop. He looks very like disheveled and mean and old and great. That's what Sidious is. So I think they did a good job of that there. Then we have Dooku, and this is okay. I think I do like the singular pop a little bit better, but this is cool and it has to be part of the set. And then we have the Darth Vader. This one's okay as well. It's kind of the same deal where there's been better Vaders, but this is a good one to represent in the Red Saber series. And then the last pop being the Artist Series pop. This is one of those Artist Series pops where I can kind of let Funko get away with this because it's not just logos and the word Star Wars and maybe like Darth Vader's helmet or like his lightsaber plastered all around this. It kind of represents, okay, Darth Vader was born when Anakin eventually fell into the lava on Mustafar. So that represents this pretty well. So I can let them get away with this pop, but a lot of these Artist Series pops are pretty junk. And this one is definitely not great by any means, but it's also not the worst that we've seen.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we now have YouTube channel memberships. So let's check out what you get if you sign up. So of course, when you go to the main page, you are going to press that join button. And when you press that join button, there's going to be two different tiers that you can choose from. The first one being the MDK supporter, which is only $2.99 Canadian a month, which you're going to get a loyalty badge beside your name in the comments on any videos or possible live streams, and it will change over time the longer that you are a member of the channel. And you'll actually get to use custom emojis in the comment section below, like the MDK Collects logo, a DK logo representing myself, DK Wrestler, an MD logo representing our co-host MD Shady, and then also by popular demand, MD Shady's cat chopper is an official emoji. And of course, you will be getting a shout out on every single video and podcast going forward. And then we also have another tier called the Early Bird Gets the Worm, which is $4.99 Canadian a month, and you get everything that you get from the previous tier of MDK supporter, plus you will get early access to every single video and podcast going forward. So if, let's say, on a certain day we plan to release a video and you're going on vacation, you can watch it the day before you go on vacation because you are a member of the channel. Plus, we have just added to this membership that we will have a behind the scenes look at different videos and podcasts that we are doing. So maybe even at this point, this is where you will exclusively get the bloopers and outtakes for all of our videos, is right here in the behind the scenes access as a part of the Early Bird Gets the Worm tier. So definitely consider signing up for our YouTube channel membership. It will be greatly appreciated by both MD Shady and I that will be able to continue this channel going forward. And of course, we are going to get to our segment of top 5 pops that we want to see next from the prequels overall. But I should mention, because I forgot to mention while talking about Revenge of the Sith, is kind of ranking these movies. I'm going to mention right now that if I were to rank these from best to worst, I would easily have to say 3, 1, 2. Obviously, I knew I was mentioning how Attack of the Clones was like the worst movie of the entire Star Wars franchise, so that went to the bottom, and I highly respect Revenge of the Sith, so that's why it's at the best. So yeah, 3, 1, 2, and I feel like for MD's, for some reason, his is almost identical, but flipping 1 and 3. I feel like he's gonna put number 1 at 1, and it's 1, 3, 2.
Yeah, mine is 1, 3, 2. I just have a soft spot for The Phantom Menace. I think it's a great movie, and it has so much nostalgia for me. It's one of those movies that I've watched so many times over. I've seen it way more than Revenge of the Sith, but that doesn't take away from Revenge of the Sith. I think they're pretty much both like equally great in regards to what they are. I mean, with The Phantom Menace, you get kind of the buildup of this story. You get a lot of cool characters that are introduced, like Qui-Gon Jinn, Watto, Darth Maul. And then with Revenge of the Sith, you get a lot of really cool moments and battles. And then you get to kind of finish off the prequel story with that movie. I think it really just comes down to, I just have a lot more nostalgia for number 1. So that's why I put it as number 1, number 3, and then number 2. None of these movies are really bad in my opinion. I don't think there's really a bad Star Wars movie. I love Star Wars, but when you rank them, you got to put them somewhere.
So now we're going to move on to prequels pops we want to see next. So each of us had 5 Funko Pops. Not sure if we're going to have any similarities as terms to our list. Maybe we'll have different ones. But first one I'm going to have is for a pop I want to see for Phantom Menace. I kind of teased it earlier, and that is a Sebulba Pop Rides. I think it'd be really cool to have Sebulba in his pod racer, and I think that would be really awesome to see. And then I had written down one that's kind of tied to both Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but I'm counting as like an Attack of the Clones one. And that is like the more circular battle droids that you see throughout the movie. I think that'd be pretty cool to see. And this one is for sure from Attack of the Clones. And I don't know why. I feel like maybe we both would have something like this on our list or something similar for some reason. But I have a 2-pack and it is a 2-pack of C3PO and the battle droid, where, if you remember the scene on Geonosis, where his head is on the body of a battle droid, and then at some point you see C3PO's body with a battle droid head. So instead of having, let's say, you have the one as a common and one as a chase, you do it as a 2-pack where you kind of get both of them. And I think that'd be pretty cool, since now we do have the battle droid and we've seen many C3POs. If you had the C3PO with the battle droid body and vice versa in a multi-pack, I think that'd be freaking excellent. And then for Revenge of the Sith, this kind of got difficult for some reason, even though I feel like because it's my favorite prequel movie, I could think of a bunch of them, but somehow I was drawing a blank. The first one I put is just exploding General Grievous, like right near the end of that battle when like his heart starts exploding. But the final pop that I do have, and I feel like if they do have a Revenge of the Sith 20th anniversary wave next year, that it would happen, is a deluxe moments of Anakin when he's being built into Darth Vader, like put onto that table where you do see like part of the suit on, you see burnt face Anakin, and then maybe you have like the mechanical robots putting each piece on him, and maybe even like you have a clear base with that last piece of the mask where you do see the scene of like what it looks like inside of the mask, and then you see Anakin like right before you get that mask and then the smoke.
So after I finished making my list, I thought for sure that me and DK were going to have some similarities. And thankfully, there's none. We have none of the same pops on our list, so that's good. I got to give it up to DK because there's some good ones on there, especially that C3PO and Battle Droid. I did not think of that, and that is so cool. If that was a 2-pack or a chase version of C3PO, I think that people would be going nuts for that. That's a really cool idea. But getting into my list, I'm starting off with Zam Wesell. I think that this is a pop that I've wanted to see for a long time, and this is a pop that can also have a chase version. If you guys don't know the name Zam Wesell, that is, of course, the bounty hunter that is featured in the beginning of Star Wars Attack of the Clones, where Obi-Wan is chasing after her. Then she ends up crashing her ship. She gets injected with poison, I think is what happens. Is that what happens?
Yeah, I think so. Gets injected with, that's the bullet that I talked about earlier.
Yes. And then basically it's a girl and then turns into like this like alien creature. So I think that you could have a normal version of Zam Wesell and then have the chase version where she has that kind of blown up alien looking face. I think that'd be really cool. I've always wanted to see a Zam Wesell pop. And then the next pop that I have on my list is something that I'm surprised we have not seen yet, and that's Boss Nass. How has there not been a Boss Nass pop yet? The leader of the Gungans, so different than any of the other Gungans, of course, with the green skin tone, and of course he is a little bit more, what's a nice way to put this? I'm just gonna go with fat. He's fatter than the rest of them, but he's a really cool character, and yeah, he's just so interesting. I can't believe we have not seen a Boss Nass Funko Pop at this point. And then the next pop that I have on my list is technically episode 1 and a little bit of episode 2, I believe, as well, but mostly episode 1. And I think that the pop that I want to see is definitely based off of episode 1, and that's Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's mom. Basically, without her, we wouldn't have this story of Star Wars, I guess you could say. A Shmi pop, I think, is definitely well needed, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do see it, maybe even later on this year at like a New York Comic Con or a San Diego Comic Con. And then I also have a 2-pack on my list, and I think I've talked about these two characters on the channel before and how I wanted to see pops of them, and I think it just makes sense to be in a 2-pack, and that's Yaddle and Evan Payel, two of the people on the Jedi Council. Of course, Yaddle being a species of the same of Yoda, and then Evan Payel is almost similar but a little bit different. He's got the long ears, he's a little bit taller, and of course he's like flesh tone or like a pink. I think that it makes sense for them to be in a 2-pack together. They are two of the smaller characters on the Jedi Council that aren't, of course, Yoda himself. And then the last character that I have on my list is from episode 2. Let's go back to that bullet, because that is Dexter Jetster, the guy who is, of course, like the cook or the chef or owner of that restaurant in episode 2. I think this would be a really cool pop. The detail that they could put on this pop would be really cool with like his apron, and he'd be like pretty dirty, because I'm pretty sure that's how he looks in the movie. I can't really exactly remember, but I remember him being like pretty greasy as a kitchen worker. So I think that'd be a really cool pop, and hopefully we do see it at some point.
Anyways, guys, that's going to be the end of this edition of a Funko Popcast. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know pops you want to see next and what your favorite movie is of the prequels. And we hope to see you guys on another edition of a Funko Popcast or a video on the channel in general. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
Misa Jaja Binks, and Misa subscribe to MDK Collects. Peace in, peace out.